Once again, leading off today's video with a big thank you to everyone who shows up here every day at the Florida Maquis YouTube channel. You guys mean more than what you know, especially those of you who continue on over to the Patreon channel. We have a brand new topic that we're going to be talking about that's related to an older topic. It's something that we can only speak about at Patreon, and that video is probably going to be up tomorrow for sure. So if you would like to have a gloves-off discussion about the real threats during grid down, power down, no internet, no 911, shit-is-the-fan situations, join us. Over there we can talk openly and plainly, like adults would sitting around in the living room. It's really a wonderful place. Would love to have you there. We primarily focus on psychological operations, the idea that sometimes things going on in our own heads can color things in a way that make real threats seem innocuous and make us think other things are threats when they're not. I always thought it was odd that people saw military intelligence as so much worse than infantry. Would you rather be captured and have another day alive and perhaps be uncomfortable and be interrogated, or would you rather have had the infantry be successful in ending your life? See, it's very, very strange when you think about it in those terms. When the lights go out, historically, you can look back and you can see how people behave under stress. Some people check out. Some people just get depressed and they do not want to participate anymore. Some people will do anything for distraction. There are others, narcissists primarily, that will take advantage of this. And they'll begin to promote self. There is no time in history where there was ever a vacuum of power and control. You could make the allegation that perhaps in the Dark Ages, but even then there were little fiefdoms and little areas where people rolled in and controlled smaller areas. Nature abhors a vacuum. Always. Here in North America, though, we have something that there has never been in the history of the world. This functioning 911 system where anything that goes wrong, you can just pick up a phone, tap 911. You can grab an old phone out of a drawer that's not even been hooked up for years, and if it has a little bit of power to it, just a little bit, you can power it on, and you can even call 911 with that phone. Doesn't have to have service, only the tiniest amount of power, and they'll know where it is, and they'll know where to come. What happens when that goes away? There are some things that a lot of people have not thought of. Now, we've talked about this subject. We're not going to talk about it here today, but it's related to what we're going to talk about at Patreon tomorrow. This idea of how relationships are going to change, and how when the relationships change, then all sorts of other things are going to fall apart all around. And there's going to be this huge shift. But what if I told you that here in Florida, the older folks have seen this coming for a long time, and they have found a way to beat it. They have found a way around it. And it's, like I said, it's not popular, it's not easy, it's not fun to talk about. But sometimes you have to do that. With what we're facing, with what's coming down the road, if you're squeamish, if you're prudish, if you just don't feel it's necessary, that kind of thing, if you think your pastor is going to save you, you're out of your mind. And these people will tell you right to your face, you're out of your mind. You've got to make it work for yourself. And whatever makes it work, that's the solution. Now, in yesterday's video, I wanted to talk more about Hamlet. I know this doesn't seem like it's relevant, but we can learn from Hamlet, this story from Shakespeare. I was losing my voice at the end of yesterday's video. I don't know if many of you noticed. One person commented down in the comments section, "Get a drink of water." I wanted to, but it would have taken too much time to do that and then go back to the video and lose my train of thought. The idea of Hamlet having to watch his mother only 2 months after his father's death marry his uncle, father's brother, was bad enough. But the worst part of the story I didn't cover. You see, he had made the allegation that, comparing Denmark to an unweeded garden, that the entire country had fallen into a state of nature. That they only wanted the distraction of what? Of the wedding. The event, everybody was happy. Nobody even asked the question. Was the king's death suspicious? This is kind of odd that his brother swooped in on his bride. Nobody even asked. All they cared about was what could entertain them next. It was that unweeded garden of the mind where it was just going from one emotion to the next emotion to the next emotion, like we see right now. There are people that are going to give up. The power goes down. If it's on, it's off. If economy collapses, internet is rare, they're just going to check out. And they're going to stop. Not just in the yard specifically, but in their lives. Weeding and maintaining. And this is an old story that goes back a long time. What would cause a man to off his own brother, but for the love of a woman? And that nobody around would say anything. Nobody around would stand up and say, hey, hold on, this wedding is entirely inappropriate. Entertaining, yes, but entirely inappropriate. This was Hamlet's point. And we see this now in modern society. They're like, hey, we got all sorts of problems. We got things going on. This isn't right. That isn't right. And people just focus on the entertainment, on the distraction. And the funny part about this was the lie that they cooked up in Hamlet about the death of Hamlet's father was that a serpent stung him while he napped in his garden. And that's, of course, from the scene with the ghost. The serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown. This is the real danger of serpents. But what would happen in a no 911 situation if someone was trudging through some old yard that was not maintained? Let's say a third of the folks out there decide, you know what? Screw it. Gasoline is way too expensive, and I just don't care anymore. The city's not operating. The courts are shut down. The police are on emergency services only. Is somebody going to write me a code violation? I just don't care. And I'm going to use the tactic that I'm going to make it seem like nobody lives here. Let this all grow up. I'm sure as heck not going to take away generator gas that runs my air conditioning, runs my freezers, runs my fans, runs to mow the lawn. Now some people said, but Florida Maquis, wait a minute. There are these things called scythes and reapers. Couldn't you just do this? Okay, that's half the battle. You see, the scythe, yes, cuts the length of the grass, but do you notice here? What happens to all the grass? It doesn't get rid of it. You're going to go scythe all that out, and then what are you going to do with all the clippings? What do people normally do? Well, most mowers these days chop all that crap into teeny tiny little pieces and mulch it right back into the lawn. Some people bag, some people have services that show up and they take away their clippings in bags, but that's going to be gone. You can guarantee no 911, no power, grid down. There's not going to be trash service. There's not going to be city lawn services. What you can do? Going to create a little bed like I have out back behind here by the woods. I'm very blessed that way. I have a place to put these clippings. And it makes for a nice mulch bed. But many people don't. And I just pulled up a couple of images to illustrate this point. People have gotten used to simple things like this. Mundane things, just like mowing the lawn and not having to worry about, what goes on with the clippings. And if that were something they couldn't do, what would be the threat? Revelation 6:8 says, "And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth." With the beasts of the earth. Some people in my comment section yesterday said, "Well, that'd be great. If I let everything grow up around my house, there'll be all these insects, and I can eat them." Yes, no lie, people said this. That if it wasn't for the city code violation that you would get, that they would let their house get grown up completely like this, and they would eat whatever crawled out of the bush as a protein source. But what would happen if a kid or an adult got hit by a viper, hit by a poisonous snake? No 911. No 911, little or no air conditioning. What would happen? What would you do? What if they got bit by a rat? Because that would, of course, precede the vipers. You would have the insects show up first, and then the things that ate the insects would then follow. And then the things that ate the insects would follow. And eventually you'd go right up the food chain. And all of a sudden you'd have just habitat everywhere. You would have birds all over the place. Crows and vultures and ravens. And they would be leaving their droppings everywhere. Ever heard of histoplasmosis? And that would be a problem. It would be a nightmare. Just for the lack of a lawnmower. Just for the lack of a lawnmower. Somebody said, "Well, I'm not going to mow because then people will know I'm there and I have all this extra gasoline and that'll make me a target." That's a fair point. So, I mean, whichever direction you take on this, when law and order goes away and civilized society goes away, and some continue and some don't, these houses are going to be targets. Let's say some people just abandon the home. They can't afford it anymore. Or they've gone to somebody else's house, a bigger house, where they're going to try to live communally and save resources. And they let the house go, quote unquote, back to the bank. Do you think the bank is going to be hiring lawn services? There aren't going to be lawn services running. Because they're not going to be able to afford the gas. They'll make no money. So these abandoned houses, many of them will have stuff just left in them. And when those guys get out, you mark my words. When those guys get out of prison, we talked about that too. When they get out, they're going to go hunting for places like this. And they'll have all sorts of a reason to want to hang out there. It'd be a question I would love to ask the Patriot Nurse if I had the ability to. Because she had two absolutely spectacular videos that she did where she talked to I believe her grandparents sitting on the porch. She talked to her, we covered this in another video a few months back. Talked to her grandfather, talked to her grandmother about all sorts of different things. Life was much more rural back then. There weren't really the equivalent of suburbs, I believe, at the time that her grandparents went through this. So I don't know that they would have had even any experience with that challenge. But as a nurse, I think it'd be a great question. What steps should you take to prepare for situations where you might be living around a whole bunch of abandoned houses and there are a lot more poisonous critters and things like that running around? Make no mistake, folks. I know this isn't popular, this isn't fun to talk about, but distraction from things like a collapse of an economic powerhouse like the U.S., anything to get your mind off the pain, anything to get your mind off of how crappy things have gotten, anything. It's going to be something to worry about and how it's going to affect people's psychology. I wish I could expound more here, but we will. We will. These older folks here in Florida have figured something out. And it might make some people uncomfortable, but it's the reality. And they've actually been talking about this in other circles for a long time. about things that have been going on in the villages and different social paradigms that have happened. But join us at Patreon if you want to hear about this. It'll be up tomorrow. $1 per month. That's it. Not per week, not per video. Even less if you sign up for an entire year. It comes out to 90 cents a month for a one-time charge annually. Vimeo is a great partner to have. It's not Google's servers, so they don't see it. They don't hear it, and they're not responsible for it. And like I said, unlike cryptocurrency and a great many other things, you get 90 days over there. If it's not for you, you get your $3 back. You can inbox me over there. You can't really do that here anymore at YouTube. And say, hey, it's just not for me. It's too adult for me. I can't really handle it. I'm not getting anything from it. You can have your $3 back. No questions asked. Give it a try. A lot of folks down in the comment section will attest. It's worth it. It's worth it because it's the real discussions that we need to be having about what's going on between the ears and how that's going to change things. But if you haven't read or watched Hamlet, I would recommend the Kenneth Branagh version from 1996. He does an excellent, excellent job of this. There's another one that he does, Much Ado About Nothing, is another fantastic one to watch. Derek Jacobi is the guy here that plays Hamlet's uncle. And many, many, many years ago, he actually played Hamlet when he was actually younger than Kenneth Branagh. So it's an interesting thing to see him play both characters. So a great many things can be learned from a lot of Shakespeare. I know a lot of people are like, I only read the Bible. No, expand your horizons a little bit. And you'll see some things that will really surprise you. So I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you guys next time.